Welcome to Behind the Muscle podcast. Today's guest is an online prep coach. Today's guest is Dom Kuza. Dom, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
For sure, man. So I just kind of like to start each conversation off, Dom, by asking all my guests kind of the same two questions just to get the conversation ball rolling, so to speak. So the first question, who are a few of your favorite bodybuilders of all time?
I'd say of all time, I'm a big fan of Danny Padilla, Lee Priest, Sean Ray, Kevin Levrone. I liked that era of bodybuilding probably the most. If I had to go to give to some modern day too, I'm a huge Terrence Ruffin fan. I root for him every year to win. So he's definitely one of my favorites right now. And then if we get into the open, I'm a big Hunter fan, and I also like James Hollingshed a lot too. I think he's got something that's gonna hopefully come together really nicely for him these next couple of years.
Yeah, for sure. Somebody else brought up James here not too long ago, and I think I had him in my top 5 at the Olympia last year. I was a little disappointed, but everybody can see the potential if he can just nail that peak perfectly at the Olympia. He's definitely gonna be dangerous. I definitely agree. So at what age did you start lifting weights, Dom? And then why did you start lifting weights at that specific age?
I started lifting weights probably around 16, 17. And my two best friends growing up played football and wrestled, and just to hang out a bit more with them and whatnot, go to the weight room with them and start training with them and everything like that. And then I didn't really get too into the whole bodybuilding stuff for a while, probably until I was 21, 22. I'm 28 now. So it hasn't been too long for me as far as serious lifting. But I got into it mainly because my mom's first cousins owned the Powerhouse franchise. So started to hear about the history of that and started getting into that and hanging around Powerhouse a bit more. And then that's kind of when I started to, make that shift to more serious lifting, more serious nutrition and stuff like that.
Very cool. I'm excited to kind of get into that a little bit more. Now, I like to use that question just to kind of transition into my guest's upbringing and childhood a little bit. Now, you're based out of Michigan, correct?
Yeah. Yep. I'm in Oakland County. It's Southeast Michigan. It's the suburbs of Detroit.
Okay, cool. Now, is that where you're born and raised? You grew up in Michigan then?
Yeah, born and raised. I probably haven't moved within a square mile of where I grew up. So
cool. Okay, so just talk a little bit more about then, growing up in Michigan. I actually lived in Detroit for almost a year. So talk about maybe growing up in that area. There's obviously a lot going on in the Detroit area, but did you play sports? Talk about your parents a little bit. Just paint that picture in terms of childhood up to about high school, and then we'll transition from there.
Yeah. So I've always liked living in Michigan. I'm a big fan of having all 4 seasons. I know a lot of people hate it. And that's why a lot of my friends have left because of winters and stuff, but I actually enjoy it a lot. Growing up, we lived in a good neighborhood and everything. And I played soccer most of my life. And then when I got into the soccer, I started playing competitively, played club, travel, all of that. And then started to, kind of fade away from it, start training a bit more and getting more focused on the weight room. But for most of my life, I played soccer. That was my main sport. I played a little basketball, just like the middle school basketball kind of stuff. But I went to private school. I had a really good life growing up. And then 2008 happened and my family kind of lost everything they had. So that was probably one of the most pivotal moments in my life, because now when I look back at it, it's a huge reason why I probably have the work ethic I have today. because it was kind of like, well, I don't want my family to ever have to go through something like that. So I'm going to make sure that doesn't happen, kind of thing. So it sucked in the moment, but taught a lot now when I look back at it, to, just help develop and become better. It's something that I kind of credit a lot to my success too, is going through all of that. But no, everything growing up was really smooth. I played a lot of video games. I played World of Warcraft for like the longest time. I'm the biggest closet nerd. When I start talking about this stuff on Instagram, people are like, dude, would have no idea like you're into all this stuff. But yeah, no, I had a very good life growing up. Definitely some life lessons along the way, but they molded me to who I am today.
Only child, or you have siblings?
No, I have one brother. He's 3 years younger than me. He does absolutely nothing fitness at all. He's in like the demolition renovation business. Yeah, no, he played football, but he never got really interested in the weight room or anything like that.
Okay, now I want to ask you just a little bit about kind of what you said, like 2008, there was, economically here in the United States, just some not so good times. Now, if you don't mind me asking, Dom, like what industry or what careers did your parents have to where that really affected them? And then, I mean, how did your parents maybe talk to you and your brother about it or not? Or how did you kind of figure out like, hey, something's got to give here. I've got to maybe start working a little bit harder. Like talk a little bit more how that shaped you, because you said that was very pivotal in your younger years.
Yeah. So what I can remember, my mom wasn't working. And in a way of just like my dad was just supporting, and that was it. She didn't need to work. My dad was involved in like, at the time, I want to say he had a couple grocery stores here in Detroit. Like, you lived in Detroit, so how there's like random independent grocers all over the place. And then it was a huge bad investment at the wrong time that happened. It was an investment property development in Florida that a bunch of probably every single dollar went to, thinking it would have had this crazy return and everything, but nobody knew 2008 was going to happen like that. But that happened, and then that's when things started getting really rough. My parents never really talked to us about it. It was kind of, I was old enough to kind of realize, like my brother wasn't old enough to realize, but I was kind of getting hip to it. Like, okay, we're not doing certain things like we used to, and we're talking about having to move, and why are we leaving this house, things like that. And then it was kind of like, okay, well, if we can't do all these certain things anymore, but I want to try to continue to do them, I'm going to have to start working. Right. And then I asked my dad for, where can I go work? I want to, start making my own money. So maybe I can be like less of a burden at that point. So that was all like kind of where I started, I started working before I could drive, which I'm sure it might be illegal, but I was working at places before I could drive, and I think that kind of made me really make sure to just always work, and always make sure you're working, because you never know when stuff like that can happen. And I think that's what the big takeaway I took from it was kind of like how sudden it happened and how crazy the impact it had on everybody, on so many people I knew.
For sure, man. Yeah. I was in college at that time, and I remember, just hearing different things in terms of the university I was going to, the people that donated a lot of money, they lost a lot of money. People, I mean, they were cutting people kind of right and left at the college. And I was in college. I was more interested in partying and things like that. So I wasn't really too privy to it, but you kind of knew enough that something was a little off, during those years. So very, very interesting. Now, I saw something, Dom, about you not going to dental school. So I'm assuming, and then you went to private school. I'm assuming academics was something that either you really enjoyed or your parents really stressed, or maybe both? Talk about the academic side of things. And then where did you wanting to be a dentist come into play? Was that something you always
Yeah.
want to do, or was that something kind of later in high school? Talk about that.
So academics was always something I enjoyed. I enjoyed academics. Like I could sit and read and do all of that with no one had to force me to do anything. But so I went to private school most of my life, and then during high school was kind of like, you know, where you start to decide like, oh, what do I want to be when I grow up and all these things. And then my godfather is a dentist, and it was kind of like, okay, like this might be a good path and things like that. But that slowly turned into, you know, me working at a dental office and then realizing how much I couldn't stand this. But I was still following that path and still trying to do all of that, which was kind of feeling like a forced thing at that point. I'm Middle Eastern, so we come from a community that's very like, you know, academic based, and you need to be a doctor, you need to be a lawyer, etc., like that. So, you know, I thought, okay, this is still something I have to do. Like, how am I going to make money if I don't do something like this? But then I took my like entry exams for dental school, applied. The first year I didn't get in. I got an interview and waitlisted, and then the second year I got an interview to the same school and then got accepted, and then decided not to go. And that was at the point in my life where I was like, I cannot do this forever. Like, I would hate my job, I would hate everything. So then I stopped, went back to school, did a post-bachelor's, and then went and did my master's in exercise physiology after that.
Okay.
And so we could talk about that now.
Yeah, go for it. So I guess my question is, you know, going to school to kind of think about being a dentist, and then, you know, like I saw on your Instagram, the master's in exercise physiology. So when did you kind of like, when was there a switch in your life? I know you kind of got introduced to the weights towards the end of high school with some of your friends. Was that kind of the point where you kind of like, man, cause you know, you played soccer, but it doesn't sound like you were really like deep into sports that much. So where was that shift or that change where you really started to get a strong interest in, like, you know, exercise science and that realm?
It was probably like, I would say like beginning of college, when I started learning. I was my bachelor's is in biology. So when I started taking those kind of classes, started learning more about the human body, things like that, I started getting really interested. And then this is also at the same time Instagram started to become a thing. And I remember specifically seeing Sadiq Hadzovic on Instagram. And I was like, wow, like that's pretty crazy that a person can get to a point like that. I mean, this is him, long hair and everything, like old pictures. But that's when I started to get more interested. And then I started training pretty regularly in college and making like trying to figure out dieting and things like that, bodybuilding.com, etc., like all that kind of stuff. So it was more so like during the beginning of college is when a lot of that shifted, to where I started enjoying the training like a bodybuilder, eating like a bodybuilder, you know, things like that. So that was probably the main thing. And then part of when I was studying for that dental admissions test was, I was more concerned about when I would be finished studying to go to the gym than I was finishing my studying and training later. So that's when I started to, you know, I was planting hints in my brain at that point, like, hey, maybe this isn't what you want to do, you know, things like that. And when I look back at it now, it's like, yeah, I was for sure kind of telling myself something.
Now, when you kind of started to take a different route in terms of your education, you know, you kind of mentioned earlier being from a Middle Eastern background or family, and, you know, academics is stress, and, you know, like the doctors and all that type of stuff, being a lawyer is something very important. Did you have to sit down and have a conversation with your parents about kind of changing routes? And if so, what was their take on that?
Yeah, no, so I did. I had to tell them like, hey, this isn't what I want to do, and everything like that. And I remember my mom was like, well, what are you gonna do? And I was like, I'm going to go get my master's in this. And, and she's like, well, what does that do? Like, what is an exercise physiologist? Right. And so there was definitely a period where I was the worrisome. People thought I was losing my mind. Like, people were like, is Dom okay? Like, he's making this huge shift in his career and all these things, but they were supportive. They didn't really give me too much kickback. I've educated them so much through all this. In the beginning, it was bodybuilding is just steroids, right? And now it's like they see how elaborate it is. They see all the things that go into it. And I think that probably stems from, my mom being extremely close to the owners of the Powerhouse franchise. So, there's a little, being naive to what's actually going on there, or ignorant. I'm sorry. Like, so, it was a conversation I had to have, but it didn't go as bad as people would have thought, but it was more so my outside family that was giving me more of a hard time with it. My cousins, my close friends. I remember one of my closest cousins was like to me, "Are you okay? Like, is everything okay? Because this is a complete 180." But I mean, it's worked out. So
yeah. Now, was it difficult for you, Dom, to kind of break from the tradition or the mold or what was expected of you, or was it a pretty easy break for you?
Initially, there was definitely some points where I was probably like, man, did I make the right choice? But I would say overall, it was a pretty easy thing to break. I think that's just me as a person, right? I'm very open-minded. I'm very willing to listen, and I'm willing to listen, process before I react. And that's just me as a person. And I don't know if I fit into my community the best because of that, because it's a very, dogma kind of community where it's like, this is how things are. There's no or ways around it. But no, for me, it was pretty easy to break out of that mold that was, being shaped. I would credit that to my parents too, though, because they weren't as tough as like some of my friends' parents or some of my aunts and uncles were on their kids. So they could see that it doesn't have to always be that way. So it wasn't too bad of a transition for me.
Okay. I'm much respect, man. Cause I know, I grew up in a very small town, and when you grew up in a small town, just like kind of where you grew up anywhere in life, but especially like in smaller towns, here in the Midwest, like there's a lot of traditions, right? And there's a lot of expectations, and we're kind of conditioned to believe certain things and think that we have to live life a certain way. And it can get a little sticky and messy if you decide that you're going to break away from that. And
yeah, no, for sure.
So
I was having this conversation with a mentee of mine, and we were talking about behaviors and I was explaining how most behaviors probably stem from a childhood expectation that you learned as a behavior from your parents or from your community that you grew up in. And they were kind of taken back by that, because I was like, if you really dig back and look when you were a kid and things that you were taught and things like that, that's a big issue of why people have behaviors like that.
For sure. Yeah. So much respect to you, man, for breaking away. Now I want to talk a little bit more about like when you kind of started to delve into kind of bodybuilding a little more, training a little bit more. Why don't you talk about that? Like, what do you feel like kind of pulled you into bodybuilding and has kind of kept you moving in that direction? And then I also would like to know, did you compete at any point? Talk about that for a couple of minutes.
So for me, when I got really kind of sucked into it, or why I got really sucked into it, was I saw the chance to transform my body in a way that I would like to look like. I was always like kind of on the chubbier end of things. I was always like on the more insecure end of things, and thinking, okay, this might be an escape, because my body image was what was causing that insecurity a lot of the time. So that kind of was what drew me into it even harder, because as I started to learn more about bodybuilding, I realized how much work goes into it. So I knew I had to train harder, train more often, eat better, eat more, make sure all the boxes are being checked. Right. So that kind of was what really sucked me into it. And then also seeing the first round of like the men's physique guys, even like I saw the first round of the Steve Cook, the Jeremy Buendia, all those guys, seeing them, the first Olympia that they had for them. That's and kudos to the IFBB and the MPC for making the division, because it does draw a lot of people into it because of that being an achievable look to a degree, right? I would say the first Olympia men's physique is a pretty achievable look at this point. But that kind of drew me into, and then I started learning about Dorian and Lee and all these guys. And that's when I was really, really sucked into it and wanting to train like that, wanting all that grit and, all that kind of hard work. Because I just thought it was amazing. I was fascinated by it. I'm still fascinated by it, but.
So did you ever step on stage then at any point?
Yeah, I've competed 3 times.
Okay. Talk about that for a minute.
I competed in 2017 for the first time. Had no idea what I was doing. I hired a coach out of Canada. Looking back at it, it was a very weird coaching experience. I was in really good shape. I was pretty damn lean, and I wasn't the biggest, but I definitely had a really good conditioning. I was happy I did it. The rebound was horrible. It was probably the worst thing ever. I wish I would have had a little bit more guidance with that, or at least what to expect. And then I competed in 2018, a year after, and that went better. I hired a different coach, and then I didn't compete for 3 years, and I just worked on. I did most of my own coaching for almost 3 years, and I was probably about 10 pounds heavier on stage. And then 2021 was the last time I competed, and I did open. I was an open middle and a classic class A. I did both. And that was definitely my best shape ever. Cameron Cheek was my coach for that. He's one of my closest friends, but that was a really good show because I had a really big client base, I have a really big client base. And at that time, my main focus during that prep was, I need to show everybody that you can do this, and I'm going to lead by showing them that they can do this, because as open bodybuilding prep, how shredded, how inside out you have to get for that takes you to a really dark place. And I just wanted to be able to show everybody that, you can work, you can do everything and still prep, because a lot of people think they have to sacrifice everything in their life for that 12-week span, 16-week span.
Okay, so a couple of things I want to pull out from you in terms of what you just shared with us, Dom. Now, I would like you to share. I really enjoy having coaches on here because there's just a lot within the bodybuilding community when it comes to coaches. There's a lot of charlatans. There's a lot of just fakes out there. So I love having legit prep coaches and people that actually get it, that are great assets to the community on here. So when I have you coaches on here, I like to dig a little bit deeper. Now, you said your first coach that you hired out of Canada, it was a little bit of a weird experience. Can you expound on that? Like what was weird about it? And I want you to share this because I want listeners and people watching to kind of like maybe learn from what you.
No, for sure. Is talking about anabolics okay?
100%. You talk about whatever you would like.
So that first prep, I hired a coach just because I saw him on Instagram, and it was weird looking back now. He never asked for my weight, so every check-in was just pictures, and then from the pictures, that's where he made adjustments, which I thought was really weird, right? Yes, we're not fixated on the scale, but that's a huge metric to use every day. There was no cardio steps tracking or anything. It was do cardio until you sweat, which was another really weird thing. And then anabolics wise, I had just jumped into that realm, and I, started my first exposure at like 300 milligrams of testosterone by itself and whatever. So whatever, I did all of that and then hired him, and we're talking about what prep is going to involve compound wise. And he says to me, well, if you don't want to do trend, you're going to be 90%, not 100%, which, okay, I'm young. I'm like 22, 23. I'm naive. I don't know what the fuck. I don't know what this guy's talking about. Right. I was just scared of trend. Right. And this guy's telling me, hey, you have to do it. Otherwise you're not going to be 100%, which is shame on him for that, because I've prepped so many people without using that compound. And by the way they look on stage, you would think they were on it. So that's a big thing that with that first experience was really rough.
Okay. So I guess what I want to ask you, since we're kind of at the PED point here, we don't always talk about it on the podcast, but if it comes up, I want to ask some questions for the sake of other people. Okay. So in terms of the PEDs, what was kind of the point where you're like, you're 21, 22, was it hard for you to kind of like get to that point to start taking PEDs? And then how did you even come about like finding them, buying them? Like walk us through that again, just so maybe some other people can learn from your experiences.
Yeah. So I jumped the gun way too early. If I could go back, I probably wouldn't have started until like 2 years ago. So jumping the gun, it wasn't the best thing. But sorry.
You're fine. You're fine.
So one of the things that with that, hang on, I'm going to put him away.
Yeah, no, you're good, man. Go for it. Go for it.
Sorry.
Oh, you're good, man. It's real life. It's all good.
So when it got to PEDs, I decided to start because I was probably just impatient and I wanted to, get started and gain a bunch of muscle really fast and everything. And then the way I found them was just on a forum. It was just getting on a forum, looking at the sponsored logs and everything, and then just following directions. And I mean, it was pretty simple, honestly.
I'm assuming there's probably quite a bit of like fear and stuff when you kind of started moving in that direction, or not really?
Yeah, I mean, I was terrified the first day I actually did it, but I remember doing it, and then the next day I was so sore that I was limping around the whole house, and my dad's like, "What the hell's wrong with you?" And I was like, "Man, I don't know. I worked out. It just hurts."
Okay, so one more question about this, and then let's move on. But you said that you wish that maybe you wouldn't have started taking PEDs until maybe a couple years ago, which would have put you at like 25, 26. So if somebody that's 20, 21, even a teenager comes to you and wants to start taking PEDs, what do you, as a professional coach now, what's your recommendation and how do you approach somebody like that?
So I usually explain to them that it's a road that you're going to go down and you're never going to turn back, because it's, as much as there's not like a chemical withdrawal from them, there's a very big psychological withdrawal from them, right? You feel like Superman all day long and you feel like you could go and go and go. So I tell them it's a road that once you get on, it's very, very hard to turn around and come back. So I tell them that. Another thing I like to tell them too is, like, if they're really adamant about it, I'll say, okay, let's get blood work done. We'll look where your natural testosterone levels are at. Maybe you are in the gutter for some reason at 22 years old. Maybe it would benefit you at this point. But if that's the case, we'll look at blood work. We'll see that. We're only going to utilize enough to get them to like a 1200, 1300 score, and then just keep it at that. And then just keep exposure times as limited as possible. Keep compounds like to the bare bone minimum for the longest amount of time, because they're very fresh. They're very receptors are fresh. They've never experienced this, and it might not be a decision they want to go down after a year or two. They might turn around and be like, hey, I don't want to do this anymore. So that's kind of what I do with younger guys who come to me. If I think it's an absolutely horrible idea, I tell them. I tell them you're not mature enough mentally to cross this realm. That's one thing that I'd like to say to a lot of people is I've worked with so many people that have no business using compounds because their anxiety of using a compound. If that's truly the decision you're making, you shouldn't have anxiety about the decision you're making. Because if you truly wanted it, then that's a lot of things that you shouldn't be, dwelling on all the time. That's one thing I run into a decent amount now, I've realized with people.
Okay, so you brought up Cam Cheek. He's another young, awesome coach that I've had on the podcast. So how did you guys get connected? And then why don't you just maybe talk about your friendship, your relationship? Has he maybe mentored you, helped you out with your coaching, vice versa? Just touch on that relationship if you don't mind.
Yeah, we kind of grew together. His first prep athlete he ever had did a show in Michigan with one of my athletes, and they battled out in the overall, and then that's kind of how we met each other. And he was like 19 or something. I don't know. Cam was like 19, 20 years old coaching this kid. And then that's kind of how we met each other. And then we would DM each other every once in a while, ask questions back and forth. And then fast forward a couple of years, we stayed pretty close. And then I get to the point where my bandwidth isn't able to withstand like the amount of clientele I had, and I needed help. And he was part of Gifted Performance at the time. And I hired him as my coach first. He's coaching me for a couple months, and then he's like, hey, why don't you come on a podcast with Gifted and we'll talk, whatever. Okay. And then that podcast turned into me joining Gifted at the end of it. And then, he's still one of my closest friends. We talk every single day. We've definitely helped each other a lot. I've taught him a lot about diuretics and peaking and things like that, and vice versa. He's helped me with new things he's learned, and we're a very open book with each other. We don't really hide anything that we learn across the way, which is nice to have somebody like that.
Very cool. Now, when you reached out to Cam to kind of have him coach you, what do you look for in a coach for somebody that's going to like coach you for a competition? And what would you recommend somebody that's watching or listening to this, Dom? How do they go about that? Because you said you kind of picked your first coach off of Instagram. I think a lot of younger people fall into that trap, but walk us through how somebody can find the right coach, or at least a coach that's going to be a good first coach for them.
Yeah. So pay attention, right? And vet them. And I like seeing a coach who doesn't post a lot of transformations, right? Or has had post a lot of transformations. Like they clearly have a track record. Maybe they're to the point where they don't need to keep posting it anymore. It's kind of like a known thing. Like I'm a good example of that. I barely post transformations anymore, but in the beginning I did a lot, and I just wanted to show, this is my track record, et cetera. With Cam, a lot of it was watching how complex everything was, his attention to detail with tracking everything, with training, everything that was involved with like how he would coach an athlete was pretty cool. And we were friends before me and him before he was coaching me. So we were constantly showing each other how we were coaching athletes. And I kept seeing how he was coaching athletes and was like, oh, wow, like this is pretty complex. Like this could make my life a lot easier. And I saw how his athletes really enjoyed his coaching methods. And that's when I decided well, you're a good friend, and that doesn't usually always work out, but it worked out pretty well in ours. And he actually just started coaching me again. So everything that's kind of how I picked Cam. I was just paying attention a lot. I think people jump the gun when they hire coaches a lot of the time. That's why when somebody reaches out to me now, I send them 2 videos that are about 8 minutes long, and it walks them through every single thing they're going to have. That way they know what they're getting into ahead of time before they even pay me.
Right. And somebody recently that I had on, who I believe is an IFBB Pro. I have a lot of podcasts, so I can't always remember who it was, but I think they were an IFBB Pro. And then maybe before they turned pro, they had reached out to an IFBB Pro to coach them. They said it wasn't a very good experience. So I guess what I'm trying to get at is just because somebody has a lot of followers on Instagram, they're an IFBB Pro, that doesn't mean that they're going to be the right coach for you, or that they're even a good coach. Is that fair?
I 100% agree. IFBB Pro doesn't mean good coach. I know a lot of IFBB pros that are really good coaches, but they're a dime a dozen, right? They're very hard to find. But just because they have that, a lot of the time the coaching is for a money grab, and you think IFBB Pro, this guy can get me here. Well, I hate to break it to you, this guy has a coach who's not an IFBB Pro. My second coach was an IFBB Pro, and it was the worst decision ever, because they were always consumed with their shoots and their endorsements and their shows, and answering me 4 or 5 days later, things like that. So I strongly agree.
Cool. The more people on this podcast that I can get to kind of confirm that, I think the better, because I'm just really starting to get passionate about helping, especially younger people kind of getting into bodybuilding that are looking for a coach, because again, I think there's just a lot of people out there for the money, and a lot of charlatans. So it's always good to get good advice out there. Okay, I want to take a quick step backward, Dom. How did you kind of get into the whole coaching thing? You went to college, you got the education. That doesn't really mean a whole lot. I have a bachelor's degree in exercise science. It doesn't really mean a whole lot. I spent a lot of money to go to a private school, right? But how did you get into the prep coaching, the lifestyle coaching, the online coaching space?
Yeah. So because of my own dieting, I got pretty good at it. And then I started to help a friend or here and there, just setting up diets and things like that, getting them started. I wasn't coaching them. I was just getting them started, giving them a plan, letting them go on their own. But that was probably the beginning initial point of making plans for people. And that slowly turned into, they saw results, friend asked, how did you do this? Who helped you with this? And then that comes back to me, and then that turns into another person helping. I would say for the first 2 years, I probably helped everybody for free, and I never charged anybody $1. And when I got into prep coaching, I actually didn't have my first athlete until after I had competed. So I competed, and I met a guy backstage, and we talked a little bit backstage and whatever. Show goes on. A week later, he reaches out to me, starts asking me questions related to compounds, related to food. I'm doing this show in X amount of weeks later. What do you think about this, this, and this? Out of nowhere. And I started answering him. And then I was like, hey, man, why don't we just try this? Just let me take control, and we'll give it a shot, right? You're pretty fresh. I'm pretty fresh. What's the worst that could happen at this point? I didn't take any money from him, nothing. It was just let's just do this. And it worked out pretty well. He went to do this Ben Weider Nationals in Canada and Toronto, and he took third. So it worked out pretty well. When it came to prep coaching stuff, the most of the stuff I started learning initially came from Matt Porter. I was a huge Matt Porter fan. it was learning on his YouTube channel, learning on the forums, because he was a huge forums guy. So learning a lot of that contest prep stuff started with Matt. And then when I coached my first client into that show, Steven, a lot of the things we were doing were influenced because of what I was reading from Matt. So that was kind of the first point. And then that turned into him doing really well. A bunch of people from the local gym, I want you to prep me for my next show. And then we kind of just went with it. And because I was so confident in coaching people lifestyle wise at that point, that if I can help these people lose weight, I can apply a little bit of a different approach and get these people one step further to actually get them ready for stage. And then that's kind of like when everything kind of cascaded into, you know, me prepping people and everything like that. I definitely was the new kid on the block in Michigan. I definitely received a lot of hate in Michigan because of that. I was a young kid walking into this NPC world here that, you know, who the hell is this kid bringing 8-7 clients a show now? I was taking a lot of people's, not taking a lot of people's clients, but I was taking a lot of people's potential clients, right? They were the prep coaches. And now this was a science-based kid in this world of bro science at that time. So I got into the market here in Michigan at a good time.
So at what point then, Dom, did you realize like, okay, this is a business opportunity. I need to start charging, and this is the direction that I'm going to go in terms of a career and making a living, because whatever you were doing to pay the bills, you know, and you were doing a lot of this for free in the beginning, especially the prep stuff. I mean, at some point it's like, okay,
yeah,
I'm putting tons of hours into this. I want to, this is a business opportunity. I need to make money. Like, walk us through that, because that's got to be something that, you know, whatever we're pursuing in life, if it's a passion, it's something we love doing, at some point we've got to, if we can monetize, you probably got to monetize if you're going to obviously make it a career. So
no, I agree. So when I started prepping these people, started working with people dieting wise, I had started personal training at a gym. So that was like the main source of income at the time. Just putting people through just workouts, really. And then when I finished like my first prep client, and then I had a bunch of people reach out to me, it was at that point I said, well, I can't do everything for free, right? But even then I was only charging people $50 a month. So I was charging people $50 a month to let me prep them. And then I remember there was a show here in Michigan. It was the Grand Rapids Bodybuilding Championships. It's usually like Memorial Day weekend. 2018, I think I had like 9 competitors in it, and which is a lot, and especially for a Michigan show. Michigan shows aren't the biggest, and having 9 competitors, and I think like 7 of them won their classes. That was kind of like a really good, like, okay, it was a good confidence booster for myself. And then to the eyes of everybody, it was kind of like, okay, this kid actually isn't just like a guy who competed and is now a coach. It's, you know, this kid actually knows what he's doing. And then that kind of grew with coaching more people. And then eventually, as like the threshold of people started coming up, I started increasing pricing to like $100 a month. And then, you know, slowly building up now to where I'm around $400 a month.
Wow. Now, how do you determine your pricing? And I honestly don't know. Like, I own a gym, I do the in-person personal training. So, and I'm in a very small town, so you can't outprice your potential clients, your clients, right? So I know that's kind of part of it, but within the online coaching realm, I mean, how does that kind of work? Do you like talk to, you know, Cam? Do you talk to some of the other coaches? Like, how do you specifically set your pricing? Maybe not how other coaches do it, but how do you do that so that you are kind of getting what you want to get in terms of money coming in?
Yeah, I would say for the longest time I devalued myself and the knowledge I have and the things I was doing, because I'm always in some sort of continued education. I'm always doing something to get better. And I was probably devaluing myself with what I was charging. And at the point where a lot of people were telling me you're too cheap, or this is too inexpensive, like you should charge more. When I have clients telling me that, that's a problem. So that was one point. And then I look at the coaches that I can compare myself to, right? I can't compare myself to, Chris Aceto. I can't compare myself to, there's tiers of coaches in my opinion. And so I look at Mahaley, I look at Braden, I look at Cam, I look at Mark, I look at all these guys where we're kind of like similar follower base, similar, similar track records with, I've coached a few pros, Cam has a few pro wins. We have a bunch of national wins. We have a bunch of that kind of stuff. So kind of same caliber coaching. And I've asked them, what do you charge? I'm curious. Like, I just want to see like where I'm at charging wise. And Cam is probably like the one I probably talk about it the most with. And, I think Cam is a phenomenal coach, and looking at his pricing, I was like, okay, I'll go a little bit underneath this. And that's where like my current day pricing is at now. Kind of influenced because of like just comparing around all these other similar caliber coaches to me.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I was going to say the space we're in right now, I don't know if it's just our age group or what, but coaching has really changed in that coaches are friends now. Coaches used to be like sworn enemies back in the day. And now it's like I could pick up the phone and call Will Sage in California or Matt Cusano in North Carolina and get help from any of these guys that I need to get help from, which is one of the things that I really love about online coaching now, is that I actually feel like I have a network and not just a bunch of people against me. Because in Michigan, when I didn't know anybody, all the coaches were older guys, and I'm this kid, and it's all a bunch of cliques, and these cliques don't talk to these cliques and things like that. And that's really not a way to just help everybody get better. Which is something I really am happy about, like seeing how coaching has really shifted today.
Yeah, I definitely, I think you hit the nail on the head, Dom, with the kind of like your generation, because even these young up and comer bodybuilders, like within the IFBB NPC, like from what I see on Instagram, I mean, everybody's very friendly. Everybody like gets along. Some people are like, moving to the same places and training together. And like I'm 35, and I think like my generation, a little bit older, it's like more like, hey, this is my territory. This is, I guess I'm older, so maybe I don't know. Sometimes with the athletes, I just, even like with like in the NBA and stuff, I mean, you see everybody's like played AAU together since they were like 5, and now they're in the NBA, and they're like, hugging each other. I kind of like it back in like the the 90s when like Jordan just wanted to destroy people. So I don't know.
No, I get it. I mean, we're competitive as fuck. Like,
yeah.
If we have clients that are going against each other, we're like, hey, I love you, but
yeah.
But no, I like it. It's a good space now.
Yeah, no, I think it's cool. I've had a lot of the coaches that you've brought up on the podcast, and I know like Matt Jansen is somebody that some of these coaches that maybe aren't quite on his level they continue to bring him up as somebody that has at least pointed them in the right direction in terms of coaching, or hey, here's some guys that have helped me with my business. And so I really think it's cool how there's like mentorship going on within the prep coaching space, and that's much respected. Now, I want to ask you, I guess, on the topic of mentors, you said Matt Porter was kind of a big influence when you were first kind of getting into the coaching space. Obviously, Cam Cheeks helped you, and you've helped him. Are there some other coaches that you would say that are maybe ahead of you in terms of coaching that you've looked up to, and maybe you've gleaned some coaching advice from?
No, for sure. I would say competitively, Matt Jansen is somebody I look up to a lot. And thankfully Cam has a really good relationship with Matt, and anything that he's kind of taught him like trickles down the grapevine, right? That's what mentorship really is. So like from a competitive aspect, Matt Jansen's definitely somebody I really look up to. Now, Austin Stout is somebody who's helped me a ton when it comes to like functional health stuff. I haven't done a direct mentorship with him, but I've bought every single video he's ever made. And I've made sure to study those and really understand those. Scooby is another guy who I've looked at for a while for the functional health stuff. And then Matt Cusano is somebody who's helped me a good bit with the functional health stuff. As far as competitive coaching goes, Jansen's somebody I really look up to, but for what I've learned, a lot of it has been together with Cam. We've just really kind of figured out things differently, and hey, I tried this, I tried this, and this worked well, this didn't work well. And we kind of like, that's why I'm thankful for my friendship with him. And when it comes to PEDs, Broderick Chavez was a mentor for a while for me. So that was a big part of stuff too.
Okay. So another question here in terms of, and I guess some of these questions, again, I'm just kind of asking so that people listening or watching that kind of want to move in the direction that you've taken in terms of online coaching can learn, right? And maybe glean something from you. Now I hear these coaches that say they have, and maybe you're one of them, I don't know, but I hear coaches like, especially in the online space, talk about having like hundreds of clients. Okay. Now for me, that I personally couldn't have that many clients. It would be overwhelming for me personally. Everybody's different, but for you, do you feel like less is more in terms of the clientele that you take on? And how do you do that? Do you have limited spots? Do you take on everybody and anybody? Walk us through that for a minute.
So I'll be completely transparent. The most clients I've had at a given time was in the 200s.
Oh, okay.
And I wasn't even overwhelmed by it. And the reason is one, I think for coaches, one of the most important things you have to have is a really good background system. How you track every single thing with every single person will make your life a lot easier. Me and Cam use these really complex, I don't even want to call them complex, but like really detailed Google Sheets to track every little aspect of everything. Cam's actually who like sent me his first one. And then now we've kind of like, we've kind of altered them in the way we want them specifically, but everything we do is tracked on a Google Sheet when you're working with me, which makes an adjustment and us talking a very fast thing, right? We address what needs to be addressed. We have a conversation, but your physical changes to your plan are clicks of a button. And that's what makes it more efficient. Now, when I had, I decided at that point, I said this, it was okay, but it was too much some days. And it was just getting a little bit, too much, because it was like, well, I have all these clients, but like, how do I keep taking on more? I can't so at that point, I increased my prices a good bit, had a lot of shave off, a lot of trim the fat, kind of not so serious people who didn't want to pay the money anymore. And then now I'm sitting around like 130 active clients right now. But I don't take that many prep people on at once. So when I say 130, I'd probably say maybe 90 are lifestyle and then 40 are prep athletes. And that's kind of how I found that the balance is pretty easy. You could talk to any of these online coaches and they'll tell you working with a lifestyle client is a very simple thing and working with a competitor is a very complex thing. So I think so when it comes to coaching, right, we have coaches on Gifted who are in an assistantship with us right now. And the thing we're teaching them is that, one of the things we're teaching them is that you have to have really good back-end systems so that you can scale, because it's really hard to make a lot of money on 20 clients. It's really hard to make a lot of money on 300 or 30 clients. Like, you're not going to be able to charge $500 a month to bridge the gap to, that kind of money. So having the back-end systems is the most important thing, in my opinion. And doing this full time is another thing. A lot of coaches have other jobs, and that is where their quality of coaching usually drops a lot. because it's a long day at job one. They get to home, they have to do online stuff, and they just want to get finished. They want to finish it fast, and that's where quality starts to drop. So, I tell people that if this is what you want to do, you need to be full time in it. This is my full time job. I don't do anything else except sit and coach. And that's another big thing that we have coaches on the team that are trying to shift, have other jobs, and they're trying to take more and leave. They just you have to kind of make that jump, make that leap. It's scary, but it makes you a better coach because you have more time to actually focus on everything.
Well said. Now you've mentioned gifted several times, and I saw this in your Instagram bio. What is gifted? Is it like a group of coaches? Talk about that for a minute.
Yeah. So Gifted Performance is kind of an umbrella company that is a team of coaches. And we work in many areas of fitness. We have coaches for CrossFit. We have coaches for tactical training. We have coaches for Olympic weightlifting. We have a lot of lifestyle coaches. We have a women's health coach. We have 2 doctors of physical therapy on the team that'll do like virtual visits and stuff like that. So we're kind of like we're a company with a lot of different coaches underneath it. And we all work together. We're all brainstorming all the time. I'm more in charge of the competitive aspect of things. And I kind of spearhead all that kind of stuff for the company. But yeah, no, I joined because it helps with, it helps take care of the nuisance that I don't want to deal with, the billing, the website, that kind of stuff. So yeah, Gifted Performance is the company I'm, part of. And it was a big move from being on my own. A lot of people gave me a lot of shit for it because they were like, you created this entire thing on your own, and now you're going to go to a company that's going to take from it, because they have to make money, right? So, but a lot of people gave me shit for it, but it was the greatest thing I ever did.
Okay, we're going to wrap it up here. I want to ask you a few more questions. So Todd Whitting is a client of yours, IFBB Pro. He was just on the podcast. I just released his episode. I believe it was Monday. Awesome guy. He's out of Michigan. Turned pro, I think, back in 2020 at North Americans. Is that
Yep.
correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. As a master. And he's, I think, about 3 or 4 weeks out from making his pro debut. Now, he spoke very highly of you. I think if I remember correctly from our conversation, because we recorded it, I think early last week before I went on vacation, but you're the first coach that he's ever had. And so I remember asking him, I'm like, well, why did you pick Dom? And he spoke obviously very highly of you, just in terms of like, you guys had talked at different shows in Michigan. And every time he talked to you, you knew what you were talking about. He would bounce ideas and questions off you. You always had answers and things like that. And he just said he's just like, if I'm going to have a coach, I'm going to go with Dom. And, I think he's maybe right around my age, a little older, but you're 28. Like I think it was probably a little humbling for him to have somebody, younger than him. And he kind of seemed like that old school guy that you were talking about, but an awesome dude. But what I want to kind of get to talk about Todd, talk about you guys linking up, talk about how this prep's kind of gone, and just how excited you are for him to make his pro debut.
Yeah. So like Todd was saying, we've known each other for a while, just meeting at shows and stuff, like in the Michigan area. And one thing that I don't ever do is I don't ever I'll always answer a question from somebody who's not a client, because one, I'm just a helper. That's kind of who I am. And two, so one thing that I read in a book that really sat with me was every conversation you have with every person is a potential client. So you kind of have to lay that groundwork. So I was always open book with Todd. And then when he had approached me, I think he was most impressed with my work with Joey last year, Joey Cavalier. And then from that was kind of where he started talking to me a bit more. And then now prepping with him, we did like a off season before, and then transitioned into a prep. And there's definitely, learning curves, because he's never had a coach. He's never had anybody telling him what to eat every day. or what to do every day. So there was definitely a learning curve in the beginning, but now he's awesome. He is a robot, right? He's does what he's supposed to do every day, eats what he's supposed to eat every day, doesn't complain, gives his input when it's valid, right? That's one thing a lot of athletes don't do correctly, is they give input too much and it's very skewed. You're in prep, you know, you're not thinking rationally, you're not critically thinking, you're more emotionally reacting to things instead of actually making a good, you know, good decision. So he gives good input when it's needed, which I really like, because it helps me understand where the athlete's at, because I don't know. I could ask him every day, how are you feeling, right? Eventually he's just going to tell me I'm good, right? But when he gives me good input, it's nice. I'm really excited for his debut, because even though he's a master, seeing him guest pose next to Jordan Janowitz a couple of weeks ago, or a couple of months ago, was really cool to see, because the entire video, it's on YouTube. Jordan was a week post show and Todd was 7 weeks out. And the way they look next to each other, I told Todd, you're going to do well in the open. Like, don't think you're not, because he was really hard on himself about competing in the open. But seeing how he hung with Jordan, granted, it was just a guest posing, but it was good to see. And that got me even more excited. And then I think it's going to be cool seeing him do masters on Friday, turn around and do the open on Sunday. I think it'll be a really good experience for him. And I think he's got a lot left in the tank, because, I mean, we've pushed his prep, but I wouldn't even say this was a hard prep, because he was very reactive. He, you know, his body did the things I thought it was going to do each time. It didn't really give much fight back or anything like that. But I'm excited. I'm even more excited after like Joey's really good finish at North Americans. Like, working with these big dudes, not only is it really fun, but it kind of puts a little bit more emphasis on my coaching, right? It's like, okay, he's turned bikini pro, he's turned men's physique pro, he's turned classic pro, but like, what is he doing with big guys? And now it's kind of like in that conversation now. So that's a really exciting thing for me.
Yes. Awesome, man. Okay. You said something earlier that caught my attention, caught my ears, so to speak. And I want you to expound on it just quickly for a minute, because I feel like it's something that's very profound, and it's something that's lacking, not within the bodybuilding culture, but just in our culture here in the United States as a whole. You said that you listen, you process, and then you react. Talk about how valuable that is, first of all, to listen, and then to kind of go on from there, because I have found out in my life, not just in the gym, not just training people, just life in general, interacting with other human beings, it's so powerful and it's so valuable and it's so important to listen to people.
Yeah.
And to go from there. So talk about, where did you learn that, and how valuable is that in life and in coaching for you, Dom?
Yeah. So for me, I started to realize that I'm more on the emotional spectrum, right? So I have a lot of emotion behind things I do. And I really started to realize in certain conversations that was turning into just reactions, doing things that I didn't mean to do, right? Instead of just listening, taking a second, processing, and instead of reacting, actually saying the correct thing or actually doing the correct thing. And I think a lot of that stems from how this entire world works now. It's so fast, right? We want to be the fastest response. We want to be the fastest person to grow. We want to be the fastest everything. So it's more in nature to just react fast, right? But reactions are not critically thought decisions. So when it comes to like working with athletes and working with people, I mean, I work with a lot of lifestyle people, so I understand there's real life going on behind their dieting and everything. So I like to do that. I like to listen. I like to read their paragraph long check-in about what happened during their week. And instead of me being the coach that reacts and says, hey, well, you're not following your diet, this is terrible, blah, blah, blah. I want to understand. I want to process what's going on in somebody else's life before I give them that response that they're going to take, which I think is huge, because we're in places in our lives that we have a lot of pull, right? In Michigan, I can post something and a lot of the fitness community is going to see it and they're going to pay attention to it. So knowing that is behind kind of how I do things now, I have to listen, process, and then do my, action, not just emotionally react to something right away. And I think, that takes it all to work, to relationships, to everything. Taking a second, listening, pulling back, and then saying what you're going to say is a lot better than just emotionally reacting. Like if somebody's having a conversation with me that has nothing to do with fitness, just life in general, I rather listen, not say something for 30 seconds and then say what I'm going to say, because I've had enough time to actually process it.
Awesome, man. I absolutely love that take and that perspective. Okay, last two questions and then we're going to be done.
Yes, sir.
Do you have kind of like a personal bodybuilding goal in terms of competition? If so, what is that? And then what is your personal business goal in terms of kind of how far do you want to take this online coaching thing? What do you want to accomplish as a coach? We'll end it there. So what say you with those two questions?
So personal, like physique, bodybuilding stuff, getting with Cam now, I just want to, there was a point with him that was a really good look at 160 pounds. I told him I want to look like that at 200 pounds. So competing is probably a little bit on the back burner, and I'll say in the next question, I'll answer why. It's more so I want to work on the physique to, be able to say, okay, let's go, Cam. I'm ready to go into prep now. But when it turns to business end now, I'm opening a gym here in Michigan. So it's an independent gym. It's just me and one other guy. We're also opening a wellness clinic in front of the gym. So there's a lot of things going on next year. That's a big reason why like competing is not going to happen. So when it comes to business goals, I really want to create a community here again in Michigan, because that's something that it's really lacking. We're about to launch a Discord for Michigan just to talk more, just to get more involved. At the gym, I want to work with other gyms. I don't want to come off as an enemy to anybody or competition to anybody. So my main goal for business is to build this community in Michigan around my gym, around the wellness clinic, all that kind of stuff. And then hopefully, branch out this gym to other states too. That's kind of the next step in things for me.
Very, very cool, dude. Very cool. All right, Dom, first of all, thank you for taking some time out of your busy schedule to chat with me and all the Behind the Muscle podcast listeners, viewers. I contacted you kind of last minute. You were able to change our time. So thank you for being flexible with that. Before I do a quick outro, any final thoughts, any final words from you, any shout outs, anything that you want to leave us with? The platform's yours. I'll do a quick outro and that'll be a wrap. So go for it, my man.
Yeah. No, I just want to thank you for having me on. I listened to a lot of your podcasts and they're awesome. So I was really excited when you reached out to me. But I just want to, give a shout out to everybody who's just supported me throughout all these years. I know a lot of people took a leap of faith with me. And I really appreciate it, because now I'm getting my chance to show that worth. But pay attention to Todd. He's going to be special. I'm telling you, he's going to do really well at Legion, and I'm really excited for it. And then if you want to check us out or anything, any of our services, giftedperformance.com is our website. And then you can, there's an ample amount of stuff on it.
Awesome. All right, Dom, appreciate your time. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome, my man. All right. All of you who are tuning in to another episode of Behind the Muscle podcast, I just want to say thank you so very much. I appreciate all of you. I value all of you. If it weren't for all of you, the podcast simply would not exist. So, couple of quick things as we wrap up this awesome conversation with Dom today. If you have not done so already, make sure you go to YouTube. If you're on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button, and then also take this episode with Dom, share it on your Instagram stories. Make sure you tag Dom tag Behind the Muscle so that we know you specifically listened to this episode and found great value in it, in which I know you did. And then per the usual, I will leave you all with this. Remember, behind the muscle, there's always a story. We'll catch you guys later.